Rosenberg, a self-described lifelong liberal Democrat, opposes the president's imminent executive action to halt deportation of millions of Americans.
Reagan who gave amnesty, by the way.
His reason? This is very sad. Take a listen. The indications are that President Obama is going to issue an executive order in the next few days that will allow for many illegals to remain in this country, essentially reducing the deportation of, some estimate, 4 to 5 million illegals. You have very strong feelings about this that stem from what happened to your son. Why don't you tell us what happened?
Well, my son was a law student in San Francisco. He was coming home from school one night when a man named Roberto Gallo, who was in the country illegally, made a quick left-hand turn, illegal left-hand turn. They collided. My son went flying over Gallo's car. Now, had he stopped, I wouldn't be here today. He'd be fine with a couple of bruises. Instead, he accelerated, driving over my son's body. His motorcycle helmet had come off and got stuck under one of Gallo's tires. He backed up, running over him a second time, and then trying to get away, drove over him a third time. By that time, a man had gotten out of his car and stood in front of Gallo's car. Unfortunately, one of his tires came to rest on my son's abdomen, and 5 men had to lift the car off of his body. Given the fact that the president issuing this executive order is imminent, what would you say to him? Well, the first thing I'd say is, why don't you issue an executive order bringing my son and the 100,000 or so that have been killed back to life before you reward people that are responsible for all those deaths? Why do you think the president is doing this? Votes. Very simple. There's no other reason than he made a promise to get votes back in 2008. He couldn't live up to his promise then, so he's doing that now. Because it makes absolutely no sense to give amnesty to, 5 million now, but eventually 11 to 20 million that have broken the law. All right, Don Rosenberg, thanks so much for being with us, and our hearts go out to you. I'm so sorry, and we are also sorry about your son and your loss. Thank you. Thank you very much. With me now, Pinal County Sheriff, Arizona Sheriff Paul Babu. All right, Paul, so sad what we just heard from Don Rosenberg. I mean, and illegal, and he talked to me. It's far too common. It is common, and one of the things he told me, Paul, was that if he had not constantly fought for the arrest and the prosecution of this individual, it would never have happened. So now that it appears the president's about to grant amnesty to 5 million illegals, how is that going to affect you, your job, and the American people?
Well, my job and every law enforcement officer across the country have a difficult job as it is when it comes to this, because the federal government says hands off. Yeah, it's now being made that much more difficult, almost impossible. And when the law applies to you and I and every other American citizen, yet it appears there is no law because there are no consequences for these illegals who are here, and the president, just a wave of his hand, just says, hey, it's okay. And we see this horrific stories, as we just heard on your show, Judge, and others time and time again. Last weekend, a 3-year-old girl standing for ice cream gets run down, and this guy is an illegal. There's Dominic Durden, who has the illegal who killed him, had been arrested for armed robbery, had 2 DUI convictions, and he kills another American citizen. And there's thousands and thousands of these. It's just tragic, and the president has to be held accountable for these crimes because he has knowingly released them into our communities after all these prior convictions.
And Paul, I hear about this over and over again, and yet, last year when the president said, or the White House said they were releasing 2,200, I think it was, or whatever the number was, immigrants and from incarceration, and that there were minor offenses. Turns out that things like homicide homicide, drug trafficking, sexual assault.
Exactly.
You know, the ICE agents are defeated. I mean, they're suffering from an incredible loss of morale. And now the president says, oh, I want to give them a raise now to make them feel better. How about you let them do their jobs?
Exactly. That is undermined the rule of law. You've handcuffed the very people who are the protectors of our communities, cops. And what you just talked about, we spoke almost 2 years ago when this mass release, this jailbreak that Obama led across the country, releasing thousands of criminals into our community, happened in my county, releasing hundreds, 2 of them charged with manslaughter. We had several who were convicted of child molestation and aggravated assault, armed robbery. And to this moment that we're talking on your show, Judge, we still don't have their names. We don't have their full criminal history or where they were released to. We all know they'll never show back up, and they'll never give us the names, because then we can tie these names to other crimes they've committed just now in our communities.
All right, Sheriff Paul Bebu, thanks so much for being with us this evening.
Thank you, Judge.
And coming up in the 9 days.